In the second chapter of Book 1 of the Ethics, he brings up that politics is the highest form of community. And then he explains that in various places in the Ethics, but especially in a book that he wrote called The Politics. The Ethics ends with a reference to politics. This moral concern, this concern with the good that we have, is born, according to Aristotle, in our capacity to talk, which involves seeing the good in things. What a thing is. Talking is the same thing as thinking. The Greek word for thinking and talking is the same word. It's the word logos, by the way, which in the Gospel of John, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. That word is logos. It's a big, important word, right, in theology and in philosophy. Because your thinking is unique among creatures, among the other creatures are not rational, but you can do it out loud. If you have friends, or if you have spouses, then one of the things you'll think is, you can just tell them everything you think. They can know you. So what arises from this gift of reason? First of all, moral concern, interest in the good. Second of all, a radical kind of sociability. And if you put together morality and sociability, you get politics. Now we're going to have the ritual that we perform at Hillsdale College in class. What did we do last time? And then everyone looks at his notes. Ryan.
So last time we started off by talking about what is ethics. And we decided that it's the study of how best to live. And that involves character, which takes time to etch. It takes time to develop. And
okay, stop a minute. Didn't we isolate that ethics is not the study of anything? It's a way to live, and the study is to find out what that is. What are you studying when you're studying ethics? What is the answer to that? Character, you said. What did that mean? Etch or engrave.
Etch or engrave.
That's right. Something that gets in you, right? Do this to yourself real hard right now, right? That, push, and it starts to hurt. That. And then you'll remember that longer than if you just done that. And so this character building thing, hard work, and requires a lot of repetition, because it's also a little bit like this too. If you tried to build your character with a chisel, you'd kill yourself. You have to do it. You have to do it immaterially, right? And you have to do it a lot and over again. And we said what the purpose of ethics is, didn't we?
Well, it's to form the character in accordance with the good.
And the purpose of that?
Well, the good is beautiful, so it's good for its own sake. So everything, it's in order to bring the human person into order to direct his action with the good or towards it. To be happy.
There we go. That's, all of that you just said is summarized in the expression happiness, but we're going to get there. Now, you'll find out, by the way, anybody who undertakes a serious college education will find out that much of the time and much of the benefit is contained in learning what words mean. And we threw around a bunch of big words last time. Art, inquiry, choice, the biggest of that series. Good, beautiful. So now we need to find out what those words mean. Also, human person. And we're going to define what that is right now. Okay, so we're going to turn to a different book by Aristotle. It's called The Politics. Gil, tell us what politics are.
Politics is, I don't want to say study.
Yeah, it ain't though.
Yeah, politics is a communion of persons and with a common end in a state. We're talking about what is good and advantageous and just.
Okay, that had all the elements, but it was a little sloppy. So put that in order for us. Stephen, can you do that?
I would just say it's the things that have to do with the political community. When we talk about those things, we're talking about politics.
And what is the political community? What is community, and what makes it political?
Well, a community is a partnership, and Aristotle tells us that, like human beings, the community aims at the good, and the political community is the highest kind of community.
Somebody read the
Because-
first sentence of Chapter 1, Book 1 of Aristotle's Politics, another very great book.
Since we see that every city is some sort of community, and that every community is constituted for the sake of some good, for everyone does everything for the sake of what is held to be good, it is clear that all communities aim at some good, and that the community that is most authoritative of all and embraces all the others does so particularly, and aims at the most authoritative good of all. This is what is called the city or the political community.
So remember we talked about the arts and how they're arranged in a hierarchy. Bridle making, bridle, horsemanship, victory, something beyond victory, because you could be victorious and healthy. We named healthy as another thing good for its own sake. You could be victorious and healthy and still be miserable. So what would you add to those? And Aristotle says there has to be some ultimate, or else there'd be an infinite regression. And I'll tell you what that means. It's a practical problem, right? And it's one of the things that's shot through with our way of thinking today. It's an innovation of the last 100 years. And that is what we think is there's different ultimate ends for different human beings. And that means that because these things are so in such an integrity in the way Aristotle presents them up and down, it would mean that if you started out and if the ultimate thing were this or this, then when you work your way down, you'd get to a different place. And that means none of this would hold true. So he's saying that just as he's already said that the arts and the goods are arranged in a hierarchy, now he introduces the fact that communities or partnerships are also arranged in a hierarchy. And then this first sentence also contains the information that if you want to know definitively what a thing is, find out what it's for. What's it aim at? That's not the whole of it, right? But there are other causes of things that contribute to the definition of them, but the authoritative one is, what's it for? And he says that there's lots of communities, and they too are arranged in a hierarchy according to their ends, the hierarchy of their ends. The ones that aim at higher goods are better, and the ones that aim at the ultimate good are best. Yeah.
Is that why he's calling it the most authoritative good of all? Because the political community is aiming at that good that's going to order everything else?
That's right, and we mustn't lose sight of the fact that politics is authoritative in two senses. One is, in every political community, the political community has a monopoly on force. You know, it's authoritative like that. It'll give you orders, shoot you if you don't follow them. If you get pulled over for speeding and you refuse to be pulled over, if it goes far enough, the military will be after you, and they can probably get you. So it's authoritative that way. But also, as Juan just said, what you're saying is then that there are some ends and other ends are ordered toward them. They give those other ends their purpose, and therefore they have authority over them. They define what they are. And this community is said to be the authoritative one. Now, we don't have time to read it in Book 1 today. Somebody sketch, if you can remember it, how does he lay out these communities? You know, because remember how he lays out the arts, shipbuilding for ships, and that for travel or navigation or transport, and bridle making for bridles. How do the communities, how does he lay them out? Can you list the order of them? Yeah, Ryan.
He starts with the household, and the household begins with the male and female who have children, and then also the master and the slave. And the household exists for the fulfillment of daily needs.
Okay, Ryan said slave, and so I should make a point about that. If you read all of Book 1, we're not going to do it here, you'll find out that Aristotle actually says that slavery is just only in the case of someone who is incapacitated and unable to direct their own lives. And there are such people, not many, And slavery is common in Athens. And it comes from conquest mostly. When you defeat somebody, you can enslave them, which the Greeks did a lot. And he doesn't say that it's got to be abolished overnight, but he says that it's wrong, except in that case. It's a very important point to make. And then he says a very pregnant thing in here that I'll just point out. He says, if the shuttle could weave, or the plectrum or pick could strike of itself, so in other words, if you could make cloth or you could play music of themselves, that means a machine that does it automatically, then maybe this relationship of master and slave would not be needed. In other words, Aristotle foresees a world in which technology does all that stuff. So about the slavery thing, just remember, it's a kind of attitude you have to adopt, which is very contrary to the prevailing attitude today. Once you adopt the attitude that you're going to find out the truth about a thing, important thing, and the truth doesn't depend on what you think, necessarily, unless it's the truth about what you think. If you're going to try to find that out, and you're going to be serious about that, you're going to have to be prepared to look everywhere. And that means back in the past, too. And of course, everywhere you look, every single place you look will be in the past, because the present is an instant and the future is unknown. And so if it's a barrier that Aristotle assumes that the household will have slaves to understanding Aristotle, that's just one point to take up and figure out what that does and whether he's compromised by that. And as I say, I told you what he said about it. I don't think Aristotle thought that there was justice in human slavery except in rare cases. And so that's because you mentioned that. But now let's go back to the more fundamental thing than master and slave, the relationship in the household that's primary, which means first, is what?
The male and female.
And why are they first?
I mean, in order to survive as a unit, you have to have the union between the male and female and the propagation of mankind that comes from that marriage.
Or to rephrase that, in order to have the male and the female, you require to have the male and the female. We come to be through the family, and it exercises an influence on us, a powerful influence on us, right through our lives. And Aristotle's point is, everything starts with that. And that gives us a really great possibility of understanding this hierarchy again, because the family is primary. You start with that. Is it sufficient? No. Why is it not sufficient?
On its own, it just fulfills the needs of daily life, but it doesn't help one live life well. The household turns into the village when several households come together.
What's the village for?
I would say the village is a step above that, but it's not yet the city.
So list some things that the family can't supply. I come from Arkansas, and there are jokes about it, but even there, it's not right to marry your sister. So you need some more families around. Also, family's just a few. And for much of the life of a family, some of them are young and require defense. It's not a very defensible unit. It's in danger. You can't really have much trade in a family. And so a whole bunch of stuff spring to life, and these things, mark you, are naturally human things. That word nature comes from a Latin word that means birth. So the most natural relationship is the reproductive relationship, the way human beings come to be. And it's weird about, by the way, human beings coming to be, because they take a long time to raise compared to other animals. And yet we have discretion over whether we do it or not. One of the elements and aspects of our freedom. And yet it matters very much, even to us, whether we do it or not. So there's that, right? And the family is all wrapped up in that stuff, and everything starts with that stuff, but then right away a whole bunch of more stuff is needed, and one of them is exchange, and one of them is defense, and so you get a village. And then something is added to that. And Aristotle's not necessarily saying he can trace how one develops and the next develops and the next develops. These communities are like the goods and the arts that we examined. They're arranged in a hierarchy. And so the family is very important, and then something is added that also includes the family in the village. And then finally, the city, what's added there?
The city is the partnership of villages. And so the villages can come together, and because of that, the city can actually exist itself. It's self-sufficient.
And what does it aim for?
Living well, happiness.
So the virtues, right? Law is a moral phenomenon. It's all about right and wrong. If you just ask yourself grandly, what is the good for which the United States of America aims? There's an answer to that. You couldn't speak intelligently about that if you didn't mention the Declaration of Independence, which states that, right? But you know, the same thing is true of China. What is the good for which it aims? Well, it's ruled by a communist party that makes very authoritative statements about that. You can read them. Here's what we're here to do, and for the good of our nation and the world, we few who are in control are going to do those things. And those are different from America, right? Lincoln said, every nation has a central idea from which all its minor thoughts radiate. In ours, it's the principle of human equality, stated in the Declaration of Independence. So they're not all like that, though, right? And so when the city comes together, all of a sudden there's a community that's making ultimate claims. It's very important, we learn in the course of this book, Aristotle says that the law is generally more influential than your parents, which is too bad in a way if it's true, but I think it is true. So it's a very powerful thing, and it's adopted by a people in a community that carries the powers of life and death. And that's an old story. It's true in America as it was in Sparta. Okay, so that's book 1, chapter 1. So we're going to skip ahead to chapter 2. Now we're going to find out what we mean by good and what we mean by human person. So somebody read that. From these things it is evident.
From these things it is evident, then, that the city belongs among the things that exist by nature, and that man is by nature a political animal. He who is without a city through nature, rather than chance, is either a mean sort or superior to man. He is without clan, without law, without hearth, like the person reproved by Homer. For the one who is such by nature has, by this fact, a desire for war, as if he were an isolated piece in a game of backgammon. That man is much more a political animal than any kind of bee or any herd animal is clear.
Okay, stop. Read that last sentence again.
That man is much more a political animal than any kind of bee or any herd animal is clear.
That's dramatic, isn't it? Bees are swarm animals. Everything is in common. Radical division of labor among the different ranks of the bees, right? Everything serves the queen. The queen serves everything else. They do everything together. In fact, when they're flying, they will, you see a swarm, right? And if they turn, they all turn, rarely leaving one behind, right? We are more political than that. So just remember how radical that is. It means that your political side of your nature is embedded in you at least equally as much as your kidneys or your heart, right? That's the claim. Okay, go ahead and read.
For as we assert, nature does nothing in vain, and man alone among the animals has speech.
Nature does nothing in vain. What does that mean? Julia, what are you going to say?
To essentially that in, if we have a capacity such as speech, then it has to be for some sort of good or for some sort of
Yeah, there's something about it, right? And man alone, among the animals, has speech, a unique thing. Now, the word here is logos in Greek, which means both speech and reason. Go ahead.
The voice indeed indicates the painful or pleasant, and hence is present in other animals as well. For their nature has come this far that they have a perception of the painful and pleasant and indicate these things to each other.
So this morning, if my wife stays in bed past about 7:45, the dogs start talking to her. And she knows what they're saying. They're saying breakfast. That's their point. They want something, pleasure, pain, right? They whine if something hurts, right? And we all understand. My wife actually carries on a dialogue all day long with the dogs, and in a practical sense, they understand her, but not in another sense. So go ahead.
But speech serves to reveal the advantageous and the harmful, and hence also the just and the unjust. For it is peculiar to man as compared to the other animals that he alone has a perception of good and bad and just and unjust and other things of this sort. And partnership in these things is what makes a household and a city.
So do you notice the occurrence in the word good in that sentence? We perceive the good, and that's why we can talk. The claim is there's something we see all the time in everything we see that other animals don't see. And that is what makes us unique, and that is what makes us political. Speech, which also means, however, reason, makes us unique and political. Now, you can see why speech would make us social. We can talk to each other, right? But what are we doing when we talk that involves understanding the good?
Well, because each human being is pursuing an end. We have to talk to each other about what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's more basic than that, more immediate. Yeah, Julia.
Well, since speech is connected to reason, we're able to actually reason about via speech some sort of abstract good some sort of good that we are aiming for, either as a community or an individual.
How do we, I was blessed with a really great teacher, and one of the best things he understood and could explain, he knew his Aristotle, was how does it come to be that we use common nouns? How can we do that? His claim is there's a miracle in that that's parallel to the miracle of creation. Let's see. Yeah. No, everything's too uniform around here, right? So, pen, right? And you get a fountain pen. You've got one. Yeah, it's pretty good. So, they're different, right? This is the Lamy Safari. Do you like pens? I do.
I do too.
Martin Gilbert wrote much of the official biography of Winston Churchill with the Lamy Safari.
Really?
They were all over the place, right? Is this a Mont Blanc?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. It could be a knockoff.
Yeah, probably.
Juan's a graduate student. He doesn't have any money. See, they're different. How do you know? And yet, you know. You can say to somebody in another room where neither of you can see what you're instructing the person to do, would you please go and get me a pen on my desk? And they got no idea what the thing's going to look like when they get there. But they always find it. This is light work for human beings. This is automatic. And nobody ever teaches us to do it. When we're about 2 years old, we all start talking, right? And no other being ever does. You know, we have 4 children. We didn't teach them to talk. They just started talking. You know, in our family, the children are raised just like the dogs for the first 2 years. They live on the floor, eat the food on the floor, you know, handy. But then they start talking. And 6 months later, they live in a richly populated world. Elephants, bees, horses. They know everything. Somehow they can do that. And the dogs never do, right? They're still stupid. That's their charm, by the way. So Aristotle says that's how we see good. Things are defined by their purpose. Mm-hmm. And the point is, this does this. They're a little bulky, these ones.
Yeah, I know.
And this is a fine point, right?
Yeah.
You're a very precise young man. And so the point is, it does this. And this, that's yours. This does this. And this does the same thing, except it's hot. It's got a little cool magnetic top on the top. So that's their purpose. They're good at it. They become hard to recognize if they're harmed in a way that defeats the purpose. So the imaginary water bottle with the bottom cut out, it's not a good one anymore. It's lost the being, too. The good and the being, Aristotle writes, are convertible terms. Where you can use one in a sentence, you can use the other one. Good cup, being of the cup. Good book, being of the book. Right? Good glasses, being of the glasses. The basis of all human speech is the common noun. And every time we identify one, we are identifying the good and the being of a thing. And when it says in the first sentence of this that the good is that at which all things aim, he's claiming that there's a propriety and satisfaction in each thing being fully what it is. And a bad thing is only a good thing spoiled. Mark Twain. Golf, he said. A good walk spoiled. Apologies to the golfers. But you see, the thing that makes you what you are and makes you more political than horses and bees is this ability to perceive and use the common noun from which all language comes.
So then how does that, sorry.
Go ahead.
How does that relate to talking about the human good, though? Because with the examples we've been talking about, they're all man-made things, artificial things. So it's kind of very clear to know what their being or their purpose is because we've given it to them in a sense. And so then how does that relate to perceiving the good of human beings? Because we can see that these are all human beings because they're good in some way.
So there's an explicit statement in the Ethics about this. Aristotle says, if there's a way for the beings to be good, a horse or anything else, must be some way like that for a human. What do you want a horse to be like? Well, there's different kinds of good horses. Secretariat, probably the greatest racehorse. I like horses. I like the fact that I don't know much about horses and I don't have horses, but horses love to run and they're beautiful when they run. And so their ability to do that, that's what's awesome, right? If you think that the word education means lead forth, watch a horse go forward and then watch it go backwards. It's not very good at that. Well, the point is, if you can see that about a horse, you can see it about a person. And just like in the horses, just like the mare, she's a pretty white horse, is, gentle and all that, and something really good about that, right? Serves one of the functions of a horse, even if you might be able to isolate the highest function, which this book is going to say there are many functions for a human being and many of worth, but that doesn't mean that there's not one that's highest, and we're going to isolate what that is. And living in light of that ultimate one, Aristotle is going to claim, even if you can't fully participate in it, will improve and ennoble your life at whatever level you live at. Because, by the way, if you're interested in fathoming and holding the good and the true and the beautiful, once you start valuing that kind of thing, to know what beautiful things are, to appreciate and contemplate their beauty, to develop wisdom, which is the accumulation of knowledge about ultimate things and takes time, the next thing you know is you become aware of things that really do give purpose and direction to your life. You see? And then Aristotle is going to say, before we're done, that if you practice up through these immediate and sometimes small virtues every day in a way to build your character, finally, you will get yourself to a place where you can hold your soul in attention and you see truly the things that are happening outside you, and you are not in the way anymore. Your wishes and your want are not the thing now. Now you are looking at things as they are and seeing the truth and the beauty and the good in them, which means also seeing, when it's there, the ugliness and the flaw in them and the falseness in them. You see? And to see the world as it is, you actually have to cultivate these moral virtues that are the next thing in order to get yourself into a state of patience and attention where you can put your energy into doing each thing before you. Not just the really great moment where you get to read something or see something that's beautiful and live in harmony with it for a time, but also the regular moments. Chesterton draws a picture, Samuel Johnson, very similar, of a well-ordered human soul and how it looks to others. C.S. Lewis does this too, actually. And he says one way it looks is when you're talking with that person, they seem untroubled and attentive. And they're not unfriendly, and yet they're judging and listening. And they're looking for a chance to help, to teach, to learn, right? And that's somebody who's got their life in order. And the point is, that takes practice. Long time. You have to really commit to it. But it's great to do.